Just to give you a bit of an idea of how tonight's event will run, we're going to start out with a keynote presentation from Andy Miller. Now, Andy Miller has been living in Beijing and he's also lived in Shanghai for the past 4 years. He's a Sydney creative who moved over to work in advertising, youth trend spotting, and he's currently the head of digital for Greenpeace East Asia. So he's got a huge wealth of experience to share with you. After Andy's keynote, we'll then be transitioning to a panel discussion with a number of other creatives from across the fields of performance, design, not-for-profits, and media as well. So I think you'll have a lot to learn from all of them. But I'd like to start out by welcoming the Deputy Premier, Andrew Stoner, to the stage.
Well, thank you so much for that introduction, Jess. I'm delighted to be here tonight at Vivid Ideas Exchange to introduce this important debate organised, of course, as part of Vivid Sydney. Vivid Sydney, you would know, is not only the largest light and music festival in the Southern Hemisphere, it's also a wonderful platform to promote the business strengths of our creative industries to the world. Vivid celebrates Sydney's position as a creative hub of the Asia Pacific and provides our creative industries with a vibrant forum for business collaboration and the exchange of ideas. Tonight's debate poses one of the most important questions we face here in Sydney and New South Wales. How do we most effectively leverage our enviable position as a global gateway to Asia and as Asia's gateway to Australia and the world? The question is, of course, not restricted to our creative sector, but this is the focus of the debate here tonight, led by an outstanding panel of experts. Our keynote speaker, trend spotter and DaBaoGe founder, Andy Miller, currently head of digital for Greenpeace Asia. Kerry Comerford from Andrew Lloyd Webber's Really Useful company. Andrea Myles, National Director of the Engaging China Project, Australia-China Youth Association. Yang Lei, Exhibition Director, China Millennium Monument Museum of Digital Arts, form a terrific panel here tonight. Effective engagement, of course, with Asia is an essential part of our state's plans for success. Already, 8 of our state's top 10 trading partner countries are in Asia: Japan, China, South Korea, Taiwan, India, Indonesia, Thailand and Malaysia. And around 8% of our population here in New South Wales was born in an Asian nation or territory. Now, these factors give us a strong advantage in establishing deeper people-to-people links with Asia and also help us position our economy to attract even greater investment from and trade with Asia. Our cultural diversity, language skills, existing trade links with Asian and Western nations, stable business environment and global perspective position Sydney and New South Wales in high regard as the first place to study, live, work or do business in Australia for many Asian people. As a government, we're actively exploring opportunities to leverage that strong position even further. Last year, we established a multicultural business advisory panel and also an export and investment advisory board to guide our approach on building stronger international trade and investment links with engagement in Asia as a key focus for both of those advisory bodies. And just 2 days ago, not 2 years ago, it has been a long day, but just 2 days ago, I announced a high-level creative industries task force to be chaired by Dan Rosen, CEO of the Australian Recording Industry Association, known of course as ARIA, and including talented industry leaders such as CEO of independent Australian publishing company Allen & Unwin, that is Robert Gorman, General Manager of the Sydney Theatre Company, Patrick McIntyre, and the Chairman of advertising agency Publicis Mojo, Craig Davis. The task force will identify industry-led initiatives and government actions to support our state's creative industries in a 10-year development strategy, which will include specific 2-year and 5-year goals to be presented to the government later this year. Of course, the government knows it needs to work with industry to grow one of these major strengths of our economy, and that is our creative sector. But it's clear that as Asian economies grow, that we have the opportunity to leverage relationships for greater investment in New South Wales and also to meet growth in demand from those countries for higher value goods and services. Deeper engagement is a key to this, and we're determined to do all we can to reinforce the strength of our trade and cultural links with these markets. I have to say it's wonderful to see so many people here tonight interested in this issue. I look forward to working with you to better position our creative industries for the opportunities and, of course, the challenges we face in our engagement with Asia. Thank you. Best wishes for an extremely productive and fruitful evening. Thank you.
Welcome Andy Miller to the stage. Thank you.
你好，我太紧张 ，a little bit nervous. So 2 years ago, I went to China without knowing the language, and knowing almost nothing about the local culture as well. This is my story about how I connected with local artists to build a project that helps fuel local creatives and promotes them both inside China and to foreign audiences as well. From this humble beginning, I've come to understand the tremendous potential for businesses informed by this emerging youth culture in China. So what I hope to achieve in this discussion tonight is for you to understand the importance of connecting with local creatives for business success in China. So how do I connect with local creatives in China? I'm going to take you through 3 main areas. Those are the 4 main influences on Chinese youth culture, practical implications, and a case study for a project that I've implemented since I've been there. So the 4 main influences are the lonely generation, economic growth, global influence, and identity seeking. So youth in China were born after the one-child policy, which means that they're at the centre of 4 grandparents and 2 parents. And they're all funneling attention, wealth, and pressure down onto their only child. As a result of increasing pressure from parents, youth start to demand more freedom. While youth might lack some freedoms in the physical world, in the online world, they've got equal rights and resources to express themselves. And it's perfectly natural for them to have online relationships, very close online relationships with people that they've never met in real life. What's more, Chinese youth are more engaged online than anywhere else in the world. So the youth voice is heard across microblogs like Sina Weibo, BBS, bulletin board systems, and instant messages like QQ. The second major influence is economic growth. China's economic success over the past 20 years or so gives Chinese youth a more optimistic outlook. And the China that they know is a stronger China. It's the China that hosted the 2008 Beijing Olympics and the 2010 Shanghai World Expo. With more opportunities for self-improvement, Chinese youth are also more willing to spend on things that make them feel good about their lives. Not to mention the fact that China is now the 2nd largest GDP in the world. I'm sure that's nothing new to you all. The third major influence is global influence. Over the past 30 years, China's opened up its doors to the world, and we're all gradually opening up to China as well. For youth in China, global influences create a thirst for culture, lifestyle, and values that are different to China. Those differences are then mashed up and reproduced in a way that's uniquely Chinese. Youth in China follow three main streams of content. I'll just wait for the slides to catch up. Those three main streams are content from Hong Kong and Taiwan, content from more mature contemporary Asian cultures like Korea and Japan, and content from Britain and the US. Since most of this content is not available on TV, streaming video through sites like Tudo and YouTube are popular channels for youth to discover this content. They're consuming everything from American favorites like Friends and Gossip Girl to popular Taiwanese dramas. Identity seeking is the fourth major influence, and although traditional values are still traditional values of conforming to the mass are still present in Chinese youth, unity is important. The mainstream youth are seeking new ways of expressing themselves and new identities that help offer a balance between fitting in with their friends and displaying their own personality. Trending celebrities are a great example of the shift in mainstream youth taste. So the celebrities that youth are following these days no longer have traditional good values, and they're personified by people like Xiao S, who's a Taiwanese personality, TV star and actress, and Lady Gaga. Emerging subcultures are another great example of the trend towards youth looking for new ways to express themselves. Interests that used to be thought of as a waste of time or dangerous are now viable career options for some youth, such as indie music or skateboarding. So in the last 2 years, I've been working for a youth research company on projects for Nike and Claire's, as well as a couple of global ad agencies leading projects for Volkswagen and Absolute Vodka. And over those last couple of years, I've just picked up a few practical tips that maybe I can discuss with you now. I've broken them down into three areas. One is digital differences, the second is made well in China, and the third is test all the grey areas. So, digital differences. I'm sure some of you are already aware that Sina Weibo is the most popular social network in China. What started out as China's answer to Twitter has fast become something a lot bigger than that, incorporating features from other social networks like Facebook, Groupon, Foursquare, and a ton more, most of which are actually blocked in China. And Kevin Rudd's on Weibo, as you'd expect. So if you'd like to know what he's saying and you don't happen to read Chinese, then there's a great site called Rudd on Weibo, which a friend of mine runs. You can see it there. Another major platform in China is Taobao, which is China's answer to eBay. And it's interesting to note that 75% of all online transactions go through eBay, which, given the population of China and the 300 million odd people online, that's not a small figure. And along those lines, delivery culture in China is something that is a real game changer for businesses. Most of the orders that are placed on Taobao can arrive within 24 hours. And even in a quite consumer-light office like Greenpeace, there's still a heavy flow of deliveries. The next practical implication is made well in China. Young consumers are really eager to shake the copycat tag, and they're looking for brands to lead that. Apple employees did just that in Shanghai, and they wore these red T-shirts that had a Chinese slogan, or the slogan in Mandarin underneath the Apple symbol, which says, designed in California, made for China. And it's a kind of ironic play on the words that you see on the back of an iPhone that say, designed in California, assembled in China. The third practical implication is testing the grey areas. And business in China really is one big grey area. So I think you really need to be brave enough to test the line and find out where that is for whatever industry you're working in. Sometimes you can be overly cautious though, which was the case when I was working on the Absolute Blank campaign in Shanghai. We wanted to create a blank canvas out of one of the only graffiti spots in Shanghai, which is pictured here, called Mogan Shanlu. And in an effort to get buy-in from the entire street art community, we ended up not being able to launch the project because nobody wanted to take responsibility for being the person that gave us the go-ahead from within the street art community. The third practical implication, the case study is actually my project that I launched about a year ago. It's a documentary music video project called DaBaoGe, and we're attempting to document the indie music scene, which is growing extremely rapidly and is really interesting with the new sounds that are coming out of it. The concept is based on a mashup of two blogs that you probably have already heard about, one called The Takeaway Shows, which is a French blog, and another one called Day Trotter, which is based in the States. And we've localized it with local Chinese stories and Chinese talent artists. So there's 5 steps that I think we've taken to try and make that project work. And so I'll outline them for you now. The first one is to reach out to contacts that already exist and have established projects on the ground. If you don't speak a lot of Chinese, which was the case for me, then that it helps if those people are sometimes foreigners. It also helps if you don't step on their toes as well, because it doesn't really create too many friends for you on the ground. The second one is to prove the concept. And when we first started, we went out and shot it and did the sound with a foreign band, and I'd never done sound before, so that was something extremely new to me. But working with a foreign band to start with also helped local Chinese artists see that this was a project that could be valuable for them as well, without asking too much of anyone in advance. The third step that we took was to collaborate with local artists. The 2 people pictured are part of a collective called Idle Beats, who do hand-drawn, screen-printed gig posters, all limited edition. So they were already fairly heavily involved in the music scene, and we're collaborating with them to do unique pieces of artwork inspired by each film that we create. We're also working with a French artist who is living and based in Shanghai called Kerry. He did all of our titles and our logo, and we're looking to do a 3-way collaboration with an artist called Mo Tong, who does really beautiful Chinese typography that you can see on the bottom right. The fourth step, was content partnerships. And we contacted a local video platform called Tudo, which is, I guess, an equivalent of YouTube. And they're always really interested in high quality new content. And so we were able to strike up a partnership with them where we provide each of our new videos and they feature them on the fashion channel, which has been great for us because without any media buying, we've, on most videos, had around about 38 to 40,000 views, which I don't think I ever would have hoped for in Australia. We've also been featured on YouTube on the music homepage, and that's part of our focus to also take this Chinese content to foreign audiences. We've been lucky enough for Converse to see the value in our project as well. Converse saw the value in our project helping them to engage with local creatives in an authentic way. And I definitely don't think we would have received this kind of early support in Australia. So I think it's just one piece of advice that I'd give to anyone embarking on a creative project in China, is that there's just not the same sort of stigma with brands getting involved in grassroots cultural projects. So I've taken you through the 4 major influences on Chinese youth and some practical implications for when you're embarking on a creative project in China. But I think the essential element is to really understand what it's like to be young in China. So I'm going to leave you with a video that I directed for Innovate, a youth culture agency that I worked for, and I hope that gives you a taste of what that feels like. Sorry, before I do that, these are some of the illustrations that Nini Sum, our illustrator, did for DaBaoGe, inspired by the videos that we created. And that's what our blog looks like.
We all want to be young.
But what does it mean to be young in China?
1、3。
China currently has 300 million people under age 30 and will grow to 500 million by 2015, the size of all of Europe. Youth in China under the age of 30 were born under the one-child policy, placing them at the center of 4 grandparents and 2 parents. This means centralized attention, wealth, and pressure. Although youth culture for many developed countries began in the 50s and 60s, it wasn't until China opened its doors to the world in the late 70s that a youth culture began to emerge, one that is still evolving today. By the mid-80s, the more developed territories of Taiwan and Hong Kong became the main influence on early Chinese youth culture. In the mid-90s, global brands like Nike, McDonald's, and Pepsi, and icons like Michael Jackson and Jordan helped connect Chinese youth to a sense of global youth culture. As China entered the new millennium, influences became more diverse, thanks to the massive internet boom. A whole generation of only children were now online and could connect with millions of peers across China and the world. Their sharing and communication gave rise to China-specific influences and a new wave of grassroots stars. The China we know now is a stronger and more confident China, the China that hosted the Beijing Olympics and boasted the Shanghai Expo, the China with the second largest GDP in the world. This is the most complex and exciting generation of young people the world has seen. We're the world's most important consumer. We're following and watching you just as much as you're watching us. But remember, we're constantly changing, taking it all in, creating our own interpretations, and moving fast. Try and keep up.
That's a great video. Thank you, Andy. I'd just like to now introduce our speakers now. I'll start off with our moderator for this session. His name is Christian Edwards. Please come up, Christian. Christian is the senior correspondent in Australia for Xinhua News Agency. And he's also, he's taught himself Mandarin. Have a seat, please. He's taught himself Mandarin. He's worked in theatre and media in China and has a lot to share on his experience there, so thank you. Next up, we have Yang Lei, who is the curator of C-Moda in China. Then Kerry Comerford, who works for Andrew Lloyd Webber's Really Useful Company. And last up, we have Andrea Myles, making her way slowly to the stage, who is the National Director of the Engaging China project for the Australia-China Youth Association. So please make them welcome and don't forget to tweet.
All right, so can everyone hear me? Yep, cool. So look, I think it's off to me, but I'm just going to quickly pass on to Yang Lei. I think a good moderator just shuts up and lets everyone else do all the work. There'll be an opportunity via Twitter for questions afterwards, and if anything goes off the rails, just give us a shout and we'll try and nudge it back on. I won't go over much of an introduction. Yang Lei is the head of the China Millennium Monument of Digital Media. And Yang, over to you, buddy.
Thank you. First, let me introduce myself. I'm Yang Lei, and Curator and Exhibition Director for the C-Moda, we call it. It's a very long name, and basically it's a museum of digital art in China. We are the first one. We are very newly opened last year.
Good one. The next speaker is going to be Kerry, I think. Kerry?
Hi. As was explained, I work for Andrew Lloyd Webber's company. We have been working in China for 11 years, initially touring English language productions to China, and we are currently in rehearsal with our first Chinese language production. We have worked in a number of Asian territories over the last 20 years, and China has been a very different experience for us from the other markets. So I look forward to talking about some of those experiences with everyone.
And just quickly, the lovely lady next to me is Andrea Myles, and she is one of the co-directors of the Australia-China Young Professionals Initiative, and she's going to be our last speaker tonight.
Yeah.
Look, I think we're just going to kick off, Young. I think that you're first cab off the rank.
Thank you. First, I would like to introduce a little bit about C-Moda, and tonight's topic is very interesting. We are talking about how this creative engagement toward the Chinese young generation. So I would like to share a little bit about what we are doing and what's our options and choices. And first, I'd like to introduce you a couple of photos I just took in the subway in Beijing, because this is a high battlefield of all the companies who are reaching out. And these are the new trends of the key visuals of the advertisement of targeting the young generation. This is from a female makeup festival from a website. And you can see it's all about young generation and being together and celebrate. And this one is from Lenovo. Their new key visual is kind of having this direction shift, because they are no longer posting a kind of celebrity in the advertisement, but instead they are using a a normal person, but this person is having an interesting career shift from a sound engineer from the background, but he's developing his own independent music career. So they put him as a kind of talking person for their new laptop, new desktop, because he's relying on that high technology to realize his production dream. And this one is also a very famous Chinese Supergirl who is selected among those kind of Chinese Supergirl campaign on the TV. But this clothes brand, Vanco, is using her as a kind of engagement and to sending this message to every single fan of hers, like, I love you, but I don't have anything to be afraid of. Because judging from this, looking at these kind of three cases, we can feel like that the key message are shifting because all the companies, they're trying to engage the young generation by talking to them and providing more storytelling instead of imposing some super cool or kind of international looking celebrities on. So they want to kind of create this kind of bonding with the Chinese young generation because all the young generation can see themselves in the advertisement and reflect themselves. I want to be together with her, Li Yuchun, and we want to grow together, and I want to realize the dream of this person because I'm kind of just a makeup artist, but my dream is turning into a fashion designer. So I want to embrace this dream. So these are very interesting trend in China's like key visuals communication. So down to us, so we are CMODA in Beijing, which are the first museum of digital art in Beijing, and we just opened last December. And our position is being a kind of cultural incubator in the digital culture front. And we are looking at the creative future. So all the, you can sense what the Chinese young generation, they are keen on at the moment, but we are kind of spotting the future. What is the creative future for China? And so in terms of this, we are kind of creating, our mission is we are trying to be the first to discover the growing potential of the emerging scenes. And we are trying to attract the creators, not the followers. And so we use all of our events, including exhibitions, workshops, talks, residencies, and also linking all the audience and the creative artists and the institution, organization, linking them to mentors and the funding resources. That's what we do. So give you quickly some of the examples. I like to introduce Avatar and the Make Carnival. First, our opening exhibition initiative is called Avatar. This is me draw from the famous Avatar concept, but we twist that into the AV, AT, and AR, which means we break this Avatar culture where all the young generation, as we just mentioned, that they're trying to get online and create their own digital avatar, which is their another kind of way of express themselves and make the connection with around the world. But we twist that into, first AV means audiovisual, how we look at avatar from the audiovisual creativity, and AT, which means locative. A lot of activities happen on-site and on the location. And AR, which means advanced reality, which means we mix the virtual reality with the real reality. So in the program, we introduce all kinds of different works from all these three different fields that create this kind of amalgamation of all the happenings and phenomena from here. And this work is a kind of a mixed reality work created by a Beijing-based artist. And he reproduced this kind of cultural area in Beijing, which is called 798, and recreate all the 30 or more than 30 different digital avatars. Some of them are real, like Obama, maybe, and some of them are purely virtual, like maybe the bunny girl, and some of the naughty girl, and from the history. So it mixed all the kind of different things. So the players, you can choose, go online and choose it and play it on the big screen in the city. And this is in the Beijing Sanlitun village, which is a big kind of place that people just normally go to their shopping. But this kind of open square, they attract a lot of young people and do their creative stuffs here. And then we organize this kind of creativity workshops that talk about how you transform your creative ideas into actions. So we use very simple materials that to unleash all the creativity power from the young generation. So they're getting insane and getting crazy there. And yeah, they're making a lot of good friends. And then the next initiative we launched is just in the latest April and May is this Maker Carnival. We kind of develop the emerging makers culture in China. We spot the makers emerging scene in China and organize this international and local events gathering. So these are the typical maker. They are kind of combining with technology and creativity and make their own action and do their own DIY stuffs. So this is a kind of a robot city and triggers all of their favorite figures like Super Mario and wandering in the city and triggering all the chipped powered kind of actions. And this is a kind of a simulation of the bomb dismantling test. So you're putting in a kind of very short time and trying to dismantle this bomb. But if you fail, the balloon will explode, okay, and attract a lot of people. And this is a kind of Kinect-based kind of motion-triggered, but playing with this kind of little robot, okay. And also, of course, as Andy just mentioned, the Chinese Twitter, the Weibo is very big. So we're using this platform heavily and to engage and interact with the young audience. Okay, so that's my short introduction. Thank you.
Yes, Yang. All right, moving from transporting youth ideas, you can't probably get much more traditional than landing Andrew Lloyd Webber musicals across Asia, which is what Kerry's been doing for the last however long. Kerry, would you?
Yeah, I'm actually going to be very traditional. I've got some notes. And I feel like, to some extent, I'm going to be giving a bit of a history lesson of what the Really Useful Company has done in China and in Asia. And then it'd be great to actually talk about how different it is with the panel discussion now that we're actually presenting Chinese language productions. So just a brief history. As I said, we've been working in Asia for 20 years and in China for the last 11 years. Oh, sorry. Is that better? Our main focus is the exploitation of Andrew Lloyd Webber's copyrights, and we do that through the presentation of theatrical productions, the sales of CDs, DVDs, merchandise, and the licensing of music. As far as Asia goes, Japan has been our strongest market, but we also work successfully in South Korea, Singapore, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Thailand, and more recently, Manila. We began in China in 2001 with a two-night concert presentation in Beijing and Shanghai. And we did that to showcase Andrew's work to Chinese audiences. While Andrew's name is known and the work is known, we felt that China was different to the other markets in Asia in that there was no burgeoning musical theatre market and we needed to explain the products that we were selling. So we did a concert there using Chinese artists and Western artists. We performed at the Shanghai Grand Theatre and at the Great Hall of the People in Beijing. Now, the Great Hall of the People in Beijing was an incredibly prestigious venue for us to be given for this event. It was also a logistical nightmare, and it was a great introduction to doing business in China. We learnt a lot. Our partner in Beijing for that concert in 2001 was the China Performing Arts Agency, and we have continued to work with them through to today. We've worked with various sections of that organisation. After the concert, we then toured Cats in the middle of SARS to Shanghai. So we took off to China with Cats, got to Shanghai, SARS broke out, Beijing season was cancelled. The Shanghai season, we played to 94%. We did 52 performances and we made a big leap into the Chinese market. then in 2000 and I can't remember, 7 I think it was, we returned with the Phantom of the Opera, again in English, and we did 99 performances of the Phantom of the Opera in Shanghai. We also explored the idea of touring cats to China, and in 2004 I toured to 15 cities in China, looking at venues, some extraordinary old venues, some wonderful new venues, all saying they desperately needed product. It took 4 years for us to get an 11-city tour together. And we did that in association again with the China Performing Arts Agencies. We toured to 11 cities. We did about 8 performances on an average in each of those cities. And we did that at no risk. So it was at no financial risk to us at all. Last year, an organisation was formed, the United Asia Entertainment Company. And this is a wing of the China Performing Arts Agency, and they have joined forces with a Korean company, CJ Entertainment. Now, I should explain, we've been working in Korea for a number of years, and the Korean market is very, very different to the Chinese market. In Korea, there will be anything up to 120 musicals a year presented in Seoul. A lot of those will be replica productions, but some of them will be non-replica Western musicals and Korean musicals. Shanghai, which is probably our strongest market in China, has probably had about less than a dozen Western musicals to date. So UALE have formed this association with CJ Entertainment, and they last year launched Mamma Mia as their first Chinese language Western musical. We've now signed a 3-show contract with them, and our first production, Cats, opens in August this year. The marketing for our musicals in China is different to the marketing here in Australia, largely because, as we've been talking about here, the demographic is slightly different, or a lot different. Here in Australia, our market is 45 to 65. In China, it is 20 to 40. The 25 to 45-year-olds all have, or most have degrees. They are white-collar workers, and they are aspirational in their approach to attending a Western musical as something to be desired. So that's the focus of our demographic in China. The marketing we're using very different techniques, some of which I'm taking mad notes on to take back to my marketing meeting tomorrow from tonight, but we are seeing a strong use of social media, different approach to advertising, strong association with joint retail marketing. So things like an association with Starbucks is quite common with our productions, and a desire for retail and discounting approach to the selling of tickets. As a commercial operation, some of the greatest challenges for us in China are ticketing. We are working our way through the current ticketing reporting, management of inventory as presenting some interesting challenges for us. At the moment, the Cats tour is scheduled for 3 cities, but there is talk of up to 40 cities for the tour. So we continue to work in China. It's been 10 years and we have made great inroads, but it is a slow process. It requires patience and a lot of chatting. Thank you.
Thanks, Kerry. I think in many ways the rise of China is reflected in the growth of its media infrastructure. And I know that in 1979, about 10 million Chinese had access to a television, which is less than 1 in 100. And by 2003, that number was 40 out of every 100, according to the World Bank. I don't know what the World Bank was doing counting Chinese TVs at that time. But the media infrastructure is huge, and the general trends we see now is that it's moving deeper, there's more fragmentation, there are 500 million online users, there's 550 million microbloggers. Someone at the National Bureau of Statistics told me that it's going to grow to 720 billion in a few years. So we're painting this picture that everyone's online and that everyone's young. But Andrea's experience, I think, in China has not been that, and I'll ask her to tell us a little bit about it.
Okay. Thank you. I've got to advance my slides from this computer, so just bear with me. While I get here, how many people have been to China? Can I just kind of get a bit of a raise of hands? Great, wow, that's pretty cool. Love that. All right. What Christian's referring to is I've spent most of my time in China in the rural West. That's not particularly what I'm going to speak about in my presentation right now, but we can certainly touch on that afterwards. But yeah, I mean, the rural West is where, you know, the growth will sustain after growth has slowed down in Beijing and Shanghai, which I'm sure you know. So I'll just sort of kick off. So this is me. You can find me on Twitter. I have 1 million nom de plumes, but Beijing Betty is a place to find me. And this presentation will be on, it's on my Tumblr as well, so if I go fast and there's things you hopefully want to see again, you can go back and check it out. Okay, so I'm from a pretty big network of young people who are China skilled. It's called the Australia-China Youth Association. Basically, there's sort of 4 main initiatives, but we have a pipeline of China engagement for Australian people to go into China and vice versa from ages 13 through to 35. So we're sort of creating a supported network of people who, you know, pretty similar to you guys in the room and, you know, that you can link into in order to arrive in China and, you know, have networks and connections, which is clearly so important. This is a picture of me. This is the last work that I did in China, again, was in the rural West. This was basically my office. And, you know, it's pretty ad hoc. You know, internet would go out, electricity would go out. But here I'm just writing a grant application for a youth-based poverty alleviation scheme located on the Tibetan border. So you never know where you're going to end up once you start your China journey. So there's a lot of numbers in my presentation. I hope that that's okay. I'm just trying to give a bit of scale and scope to the opportunities and the realities of engaging with China. So at the moment, the world, 6.8 billion people. Asia is actually 4.2 billion. So we're looking at 2/3 of the world's current population are located within China, sorry, within Asia. India and China, 2.5 billion together. So again, you know, we're talking about huge numbers. China, 1.4 billion. I mean, I think officially it's 1.3 something, but there's, you know, it's always a little bit around the edges. So this is one statistic, 500 million. I think Andy said 330 or something. Again, it sort of varies, but there's a lot of young people in China. But this is something that I thought was really interesting. The percentage of the Chinese population that live on more than $10 a day is only 10%. So in terms of a consumer market, there's a lot of poor people in China, and that's going to change. That's really going to change in the near future. But at the moment, you know, you're looking at these humongous numbers, and oh wow, it's going to be fantastic. But really, in terms of people who can actually part with their money, the percentage is actually quite small. But that's still 140 million people. So 6 times the size of all of Australia. So it just boggles the mind. I mean, I've, you know, been going to China for 10 years this year, actually, and these type of numbers still blow my hair back. I mean, it's just really just nuts. So across Asia, 500 million people living on more than $10 a day. Again, you know, 90% of people roughly living on less. But this is sort of a key slide. By 2030, the number of people living on more than $10 per day will grow from 500 million within Asia to 3.2 billion. Just sort of digest that for a moment. It's a really big market that is coming up. The growth in China is, you know, a lot of numbers, a lot of percentage points, but it means a lot of people are actually being brought out of poverty. So it's quite a thing. So it's the population of the people who are going to be the new middle class in the next 20 years is bigger than 1/3 of the world's current population. So it's a big deal. So again, so a third of the world's population, a new market coming onto, onto the fray, and we're right next door. That can be a good thing, that can be a bad thing. It could be, we might be a bit complacent about that, or we might actually run with it, who knows, but you can't fight geography. We are, it's just north. So we used to talk about, the tyranny of distance and, oh gosh, tyranny of distance and, oh gosh, isn't it a shame that Australia is located so far from these huge world economies? Well, now, that's obviously clearly going to be quite different. But how to actually make the most of that proximity, I think you can't just think, oh, right, well, great, we're developed, we're close, we have a lot going on, we have a lot going for us, then therefore it's, somehow going to magically happen. Again, it's a very basic principle, but understanding those local conditions, I think, is just so essential. And if you look at China as a monolith with these huge numbers, then you do so at your own peril. I think actually breaking down the smaller fragments and realizing that it's a country of probably 5 economies and many different types of people within it. Even if this is an old concept to you, I don't think you can ever go wrong by having this, within your mind. So I've just broken down, just very quickly, like some youth groups within China. So, young people, we sort of say, born after 1980 or so. Migrant workers, there's 250 million migrant workers within China, sort of entering the 2nd generation of migrant workers now, and they have a lot greater disposable income than their parents did. So, again, that's sort of part of that new market coming up. University students, returned university students who have studied overseas and come back and have sort of a different appreciation of what foreign culture might offer them. The new rich are the sort of self-made rich is who I'm referring to here, becoming the new global tourist. So, I think there was something in the Sydney Morning Herald today about it, but basically last year 500,000 Chinese tourists came to Australia, and they say before 2020 it will be 1 million. So in terms of the opportunities that offers you, even if you don't ever go to China, that's a real brand new market. These people are looking to spend their money, where are they going to spend it? And the poor old rural poor who, it'll be a while before there's not really longer a poor class within China, but you can't overlook these segments. So I think another key slide is that China is modernizing, but it is not westernizing. And it's really important to not actually confuse those two concepts. In other economies, say Korea or Taiwan, there has been a trend towards westernization, but China is really quite different. And I think I could spend quite a long time on this slide, but just bear that in mind. They're not wanting to be Western. Chinese people are not wanting to be Western. This is not what's happening. And don't wait for China to come to you. Go to China. I mean, China is becoming so huge, and to be honest, the Australian economy is not at the forefront of the Chinese consumer's mind. So, I think we have to fight a little harder for it. And this is a quote from an economist who I saw the other day, but I can't sort of quote him, doesn't matter, but the rise of China is the biggest external shock to have ever hit the Australian economy. So again, not small potatoes, this growth, it's here to stay. For our entire careers as young people, we can basically bet on China and still, be gaining from those skills even far into our careers. So how might we actually benefit from this expansion? I think, in each of your fields, it's going to be quite specific, but you might not be able to do business as usual. Great, we'll just take what I'm doing, apply it to China, and then times it by 20. It's going to be different to that. So I've got 5 tips kind of here that I'll just sort of wrap up with, and then I've just got like a 20-second video at the end. But yeah, small business actually does do pretty well in China. It's not a no-brainer, and certainly the bigger corporations, like the economy is geared more towards embracing larger corporations. But in the creative industries, some of the leading firms within Beijing, particularly in architecture, are driven by just a partnership or a single creative mind. So, it's not impossible to do as your single person. Don't do business in China without going there. And I would say, you go there several times and you develop your networks and just, keep it as something that's continually part of your career. People get shafted every day. I mean, it happens. It is worth your investment to pick up language. If you don't speak Chinese or an Asian language already, it's a drag. It's really tough, but it is absolutely worth the time that you put in. You will reap the benefits. And networks and allies are everything. Again, I could sort of, go on with this, but here I would say that we have a rule of law, and in China I would say it's a bit of a blend between rule of law and rule of man, and often your networks are going to be more beneficial to you than having a piece of paper that says this is a contract and this is what we agreed. So, networks are very, very useful to develop. The website that I've put here is the Australia-China Young Professionals Initiative. It's something that I help run in Sydney, but there are initiatives in Beijing, Shanghai, Sydney, Melbourne, Canberra, and basically we help, develop these networks. So, you can kind of have, people who have trod the path before you and kind of ask some advice and what do you think, and, it's really worthwhile. So final point, grasp the potential that I've talked about now. That growth by 2030, this is, don't leave it till 2020 to kind of get on board, I think it's not too late to come on board now, but yeah, I mean, I think start the journey, and obviously by being in this room, I think that bodes really well. So that's just sort of those 5 points there. And then I've just got that video. Who are we? Cool, okay, we're just gonna go 20 seconds from Bruce Lee, sort of on adaptability and knowing your context.
I said, empty your mind, be formless, shapeless, like water. Now you put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put it in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now water can flow, or it can crash. Be water, my friend, like that, you see?
Oh, I see, I get the idea. I get the...
Okay. I love that. I mean, how can you go past Bruce Lee? But that's my presentation. Be water, my friends. I really wish you all the best. And I hope you bug me on Twitter and stuff. Bug all of us. I really want to know what it is that, you're going to do. Thank you.
All right, look, we are going to move probably from the more philosophic straight into the practical, I think. That's why everyone's here. We're looking to engage with this extraordinary and complex youth market. So I guess the first question, I think, is for Andy and Yang. If we, in the creative industry, have a product or a service or a brand that we're looking to land into China, and if we're looking to access this youth market, what are the do's and don'ts? How can you identify and connect with this audience?
I was discussing with Yang earlier, and I don't want to steal his point, but I think it's a really good one. And that is
steal it anyway.
Yeah, and that is that it is such a complex culture. Youth culture in itself is extremely complex and has a lot of different influences on it, not just the four that I mentioned. They're so macro that that's only a starting point. I think you have to look specifically into an industry that you're particularly interested in. In my case, it's independent music. But even just focusing on independent music, it's a lot to absorb. So I think my point is to focus on one particular area that you're really interested in and not to focus on the numbers because it's not going to work how you think it is. And you have to have more of an interest in it than just making money. Otherwise, there's no point. And also, I guess the second point is that many of the niche cultures like independent music or skateboarding or contemporary art, they're not really at a point yet where they're making a lot of money. They're not in the mainstream, and so they're not even relevant to the numbers that we're talking about.
I would like to recommend that first you look at your creative product or into kind of which kind of culture is this product can fall into. Because the Chinese young consumers or young people, they are very much connected with different cultures. It's very internationally connected. So in terms of this, first, I would recommend that you really need to talk to the Chinese young people and you make friends of them and to try to express your ideas, just ideal testing with them. And you will find a lot of different insights or different feedbacks from them. Maybe they are totally kind of overwhelm your product or your ideas into. And also be prepared to kind of tailor your, and be flexible and be very much kind of agile to change your, tailor your product to the unseen, kind of unexploited, undeveloped scene in China, I think. Just take very simple, for example, the Fruity Ninja is from Australia, right? Yeah, it's very, okay. Yeah. And it's a very hot online downloaded application in China because the young generation, they are now very much into this kind of casual kind of mobile gaming or social gaming at the moment. And this kind of product definitely hits their kind of wonderland, and as well as the other international consumers, young peoples there.
Guys, how important is localizing your brand? I mean, if the creatives are coming up with concepts in Australia, those artistic myths and ideas are probably not going to be fit into an easy box in China. Kerry, what about you're kicking Cats off in the next few months? Is Cats in China different to Cats in Sydney?
In principle, no, it won't be. What we are doing is a replica production, but we are going through an interesting process in both the marketing of the show, a different approach. We're seeing what Andy was talking about earlier, the celebrity trending. That's a big focus of the marketing. We have a TV show which is devoting 10 minutes each night. It's like an Entertainment Tonight show. And that's a very different way for us to be marketing the show. And also the whole process of translating the show. Translating T.S. Eliot's poems into Chinese is proving to be interesting. And we will take on cultural requirements and recommendations from the Chinese to make it relevant to their audience.
All right. We haven't touched much on one of the other enormous opportunities in China, which is that China's not just Beijing, Shanghai and Guangzhou on the eastern coast, but there's been a strong policy to go west. I want to talk a little bit about this policy and the opportunities that exist in the second-tier cities. We say second-tier cities, but if you put Chongqing in there, there's 30 million people kicking around in the city. So, Andy, you've been working in Wuhan and Chengdu, is that correct?
No. I'm not working as such, but with our music project, we travelled because we wanted to make it more than just about Shanghai and Beijing. We very quickly learned, being in China, that there's amazing independent music, contemporary styles of music happening in second-tier cities all around China. So we travelled recently to Chengdu, Chongqing and Wuhan. Right. There's amazing kind of jazz-inspired rock in Chengdu, an amazing folk musician who's written about, I think, over 100 songs, I was told, who has been writing them for the past 10 years. And in Wuhan, for example, there's incredible punk rock coming out of Wuhan. It used to be called Punk Rock City. So I think there's definitely a lot happening in the other cities, and yeah, even in terms of music, though, I think one of the challenges is that there's not a lot of resource and not a lot of people have the opportunity. So even within all of the amazing bands coming out of these cities, a lot of them are sharing musicians between different bands. And even sharing instruments.
And these second-tier cities include everything from Qingdao and Dalian to Wuhan and Chengdu. And Andrea, you've been out west. This is obviously, when we box in this China youth market, the youth that you've been out there is completely different, but also another opportunity for creatives if they want to move beyond what's pretty much a booked up market in Shanghai and Beijing.
Yeah, I think I'd say, you know, in terms of those like super high earning, that sort of strata, those are the guys that engage just sort of directly with the West. I think the West is cool, and, you know, I want my Armani and I want my, you know, I mean, Lady Gaga seems to transcend all levels, but I think the sort of middle tier are looking more towards, like, you know, your Asian superstars. So, you know, into Taiwan, into Korea. But when you get out west, it's, I mean, you might just sort of, in, you know, Kunming and Wuhan, it might just be your mainland stars. But in the west, you know, in the really small places, it's very ethnic minority areas, and they really look for, you know, stars that are singing the same languages and are from the same folklore and, you know, singing about the same stuff. So, I mean, I guess, you know, it's just figuring out what pushes people's buttons, you know, like what's really exciting. And if you can, you know, deliver music in an innovative way, I think you can do that, whether the music is, you know, Tibetan folk music or, you know, Wuhan punker.
What brands, in all of your experiences, what brands, if some have come out of Australia, that's great, but any brands that have come from elsewhere into China that you've seen as a successful template, particularly in the creative industry? Obviously KFC's done well, but what brands do you think provide a lead for creatives looking to enter China?
Yeah.
Andy?
I think actually the answer is that everyone fails at some point. Even KFC, which is hugely successful now, didn't turn a profit for the first 7 years that it was in China. And I think if you look at a case study like Nike, who seem to dominate everywhere, they came into China and seemingly, from an outsider's perspective, nailed it with, you know, a really cool-looking commercial using a young NBA star called LeBron James, and some really interesting animation, which, you know, all looked really cool. But then I think shortly after launching, the government pulled the commercial and banned it in China because it was actually, although it looked kind of cool, was extremely offensive and used a lot of Chinese symbols in the wrong way.
That's right. They used the image of the dragon and then the Shufu, the master.
Yeah.
And LeBron James paddles up on his basketball and kicks their ass. And
yeah.
And so.
I didn't see that one.
But then the good news is that they have nailed it now, and you know, it's through a little bit of trial and error. And I think, you know, maybe they could have avoided the first failure with you know, a little bit of local testing, like Yang Lei mentioned. But you know, now I think they're focusing less on the kind of Nike that they're marketing elsewhere, which is very kind of individual focused and, you know, I can conquer the world, to, you know, sport is something that helps me engage with my peers, and we can all win together.
Yep, and be part of a whole, which is obviously that different individual group approach. Yang Lei, what brands have impressed you recently in terms of being able to hook into that market and even monetize it? I mean, it's one thing being popular, but it's another thing coming out of it ahead.
I can mention a couple of international creative brands. One is very successful, is Angry Birds. Angry Birds, again, in the casual gaming industry. I mean, it's popular everywhere. And I mean, it's just hit into the young people's need of playing it in a fragmented situation. And from some of the other things, I can say that the young people's kind of, their need is very much undeveloped. So there's a lot of space that you can try a lot of different products. It's not about if Angry Birds or Fruity Ninja is successful in China, then you launch this similar product. It's about connecting your competency of your product, creativity, with the question mark of the culture in China. Or it can be definitely connected. For example, the avatar. We see this not only about an art exhibition. It's about a new kind of creative economy behind, because people are kind of moving from the physical consumption to the digital consumption.
Yep.
And this kind of avatar, kind of life bonding expression is definitely a part of the current and the future developing lifestyle of the Chinese young generation.
Nature and capitalism abhor a vacuum. So with all this space created, there's opportunities to move into it. Kerry, what have been the highlights when you've been in China? What's impressed you about the brands that have gone there and ones that probably look like a good example to follow?
I think one of the interesting associations we had was with Amway, who have a cosmetic brand in Asia called Artistry, and they actually sponsored Phantom of the Opera in Shanghai. But not only did they sponsor it, but they also developed products specifically designed for the Chinese market. So they produced what they called Christine's perfume, which was specifically marketed to the young female audience member. So that was a good association.
Yeah, I saw a photo of the Amway training ground somewhere in Korea. It just looks like the place where the Bond villain hides out. That was Angry Birds that Yang Lei was describing. I just want to quickly ask about, we need to get into the practicalities of it. We need to talk about Chinese partners, because the fact is that you're not going to be able to land in there without working with someone. I think Andrea has touched on something important, which is you can't just go in there, find the first guy who is also interested in making a romantic comedy and say, well, he's the guy. It takes, we haven't even talked about Guanxi, but these relationships take time to build up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, I mean, I'm not a consultant, and they kind of annoy me a little bit, but I think it is, if you get a good consultant who knows their stuff in China and can actually check, you know, oh, so you come with this person, they have a website, you know, they have a supposed registration, that can actually go through and check that stuff for you, you know, if you don't have the language or you don't have the time to do so. It's really, really important, especially when it comes to stuff like intellectual property, you know, it's just so important to get that stuff right at the beginning and not think, oh, you know, I'll cut a corner here, cut a corner there, I can get away with that in Australia. You know, it's worked before, but then in China you might find yourself in a world of hurt.
Guys, sorry, what to look for? What to look for in a local partner? Kerry?
Can I say I can't stress enough how important it is to find the right partner, especially if you are hoping to make money. Just being able to rely on the information you are given. I heard a great quote recently, and I thought it was fantastic, which was, the signing of the contract is the start of the negotiation in China, and I thought that was absolutely the way it is.
That's true.
Yang Lei, do you have anything to add? Because I do have a question here specifically for you.
Yeah, I think this is quite individual experience. It's quite difficult, and in the Beijing dialect, there's a word of 靠谱. 靠谱 means you are reliable. But many times you went to China, I think you might, if someone you don't know well of, but you bump into trying to start with some partnership, then it's end up with unreliable, because there are so many people of different type of people. So you really need to try to, how to say, I mean, reputation, hear about from your networks, about the reputations, and also trying to spot who are the most active in the scene. For example, forgive my advertisements, in terms of digital culture, for C-Moda, we are working on a lot of co-creation works. From the starting Avatar initiative, we are collaborating with 1.0, which is a very good creative organization in London. And we are collaborating with them. And to bring in this kind of international and local common voice together to the Chinese young generation, because they are not only local, they are also very well internationally connected. So we bring in this kind of local context and bouncing and echoing it with the international context. So yeah, so we are the ones that you can talk to.
Look, I'm going to take some questions now from Twitter, and thanks everyone for popping them in. Look, there's one here from Scott Drummond, but it does lead on to a point that we haven't really discussed, which is China is investing an enormous amount of time and energy into creating what is described as soft culture, as soft power, creating a cultural industry. And a lot of what we're describing tonight, and I've just lost it, a lot of what we're describing tonight exists on the periphery, youth, underground, indie culture. But there is a huge amount of investment and a huge amount of energy put into creating a mainstream culture. And obviously this is a culture that you as creatives can connect with as well. And obviously, I've lost it again. You can connect with. But it's all right. Scott, thank you for your question. It's basically asking about what, from this youth market, what ideas and what aspects of this youth market do you think have transcended China and spread into Asia? I'm going to get my computer back. Sorry. And look, obviously that can be ideas that have come from the periphery, it can be something that's been generated in the mainstream, but I think we're looking for ideas that have been coming out of the youth network.
Jiaozi. Dumplings. I think that's China's soft power.
Yeah. But from the youth market in particular?
It's a difficult one actually because China's youth market is so young. Contemporary youth culture in China is only about 30 years old, and that's part of the reason. Well, I think it's actually an opportunity and a really key difference that I kind of touched on in my presentation, but because it was basically a clean slate 30 years ago, you get a lot of combinations of different culture and different elements that people think maybe are horrible or unacceptable in Australia or just have never thought of. And they're really cool in China. That kind of leads into another thing where another point where I guess foreign taste in what's cool in China doesn't always match up with the aesthetic that Chinese people find appealing.
All right, what about in terms of connecting with this digital youth market? How can we connect with them, again from Scott? What other channels are effective ways to reach them outside of this digital network?
Social media.
Yeah.
Social
get
media.
on Weibo, absolutely. Yeah.
And also the video virus marketing, like the microfilm that is a kind of a short film type, but distributed on the social media because it's so short and it's so punchy that it's been kind of retweeted many times if you created this very good kind of successful virus marketing.
So in that sense, like if you're creating content in English, like maybe it's a worthwhile thing to put a Chinese translation down there, have a Weibo account, post it on Weibo, make sure you seed it enough, actually work on your networks, and get it out there, and I'd watch it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would like to talk about this co-creation. If you have your kind of your initiative that can be co-created with your Chinese partners, they are not executors, but they are kind of, you are looking for those creative people. If you co-create kind of a Weibo kind of text message or the video clips, that can be very high, have the high potential to be successful in China.
All right.
So I think when you're talking about offline, there is actually a real trend around a lot of offline activities that are more urban-based sports. For example, I think North Face really tapped into the outdoor rock climbing trend in China. And also travel within China at the moment is a really big trend for young people. But also really niche subcultures like fixed gear or skateboarding, which is in particular getting a lot bigger. And things like photography as well. Many of the same subcultures that are very popular here. But I think the main difference in China is that young people tend to surf through these through these subcultures, and it's not to say that they're not into it, they're just really into it, and then they're really into something else.
Mm-hmm.
I can give you a quick failure story of,
Please do.
of my We Celebrate failure. I tried to start roller derby in China because I was part of it in Sydney, and it just didn't go over well at all. You know, the idea of women hitting each other in public on skate, no, just no. But that said, there are a group of English girls who, you know, from the London Rock and Rollers, I think it is, who are now starting, they're diehards, and they're actually starting, you know, a little league in Shanghai now. But, you know, it's not always going to work. It might be a cool idea, but it might just take a while too.
I've got one more question, because we do need to touch on IP, which is something we haven't discussed, and it is for Kerry. How does the Really Useful company handle copyright issues and copyright infringements if they've come into Asian markets? And guys, if you have experiences there as well.
We try to prevent copyright infringements, and I emphasise try. By the time you find out about it, sometimes it's too late to stop. I've got some interesting merchandise in my office that was not approved. A few books that I've had to remove from bookshelves. We, where possible, take legal action or threaten legal action, largely. We have had to go through a lot of great processes with even our partners who don't quite understand that you can't just take that image and put it on a piece of merchandise and sell it, that we are entitled to some payment of it. And it's still complex.
You've had effective recourse to the law?
No.
No?
No. We have as much as possible tried to remove the products from sale.
Is IP still a massive issue if you're coming into China?
I don't have a lot of, you know, personal IP myself, but I sort of, correct me if I'm wrong, but is the world shifting away from sort of clutching its own intellectual property rights and just putting it on the internet, putting it out there, and then just making money, you know, from the exposure? And, you know, if you times your YouTube hits by the scale of China, you know, maybe you can make money in a different way rather than just having that kind of under wraps. I mean, maybe things are progressing. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Andy, what's your take on that?
I haven't got a lot of experience like Andrea in IP, but I think I was speaking to a friend about it last night, actually, and he made a really excellent point that I think in China you have to be quite successful before IP becomes an issue, and you need to be, you know, definitely within the mainstream before, you know, IP really becomes an issue. And I think the other point is that in China, even though brands are, you know, very popular and very important in youth culture, I think they're also really ambiguous. So people are willing to pay extraordinarily high prices for good quality, which is often associated with a genuine brand item. And then, but they're also just as happy to pay a tenth of the price for a copy. So, you know, if it's your brand and it's a genuine product, then it's not going to be the same consumer that's buying your product and a knockoff.
Can I just say one of the things that I found really interesting about China was when I first started going there about 16 years ago, I thought the obvious thing was that we would do our productions in Chinese, that would be the most appealing to them. And in fact, the response was that they wanted the authentic version. And so that's why we went in with the English language first.
Well, look, we've got time just to whip quickly round and get your opinions on this. If I wanted to land a project or a product or a service in China, what are your recommendations to where I should go, who I should speak to, what I should look at? Think of a key thing for me to start at, whether it's a regulatory website that tells me where I can find partners, or whether it's a book, or whether it's a person or an experience or an institution. Andrea?
Okay, I'm going to sort of be the boo voice, but I would recommend that if this is really important to you and you think it's going to be something that you're into for the next 5 years, spend the first 6 months of that, go to your Beijing or Shanghai, whichever, do your research, which city is applicable to you, and study language for 6 months, and you'll develop those networks slowly, and people will get to know you, and you'll get to know people, and you'll have some language, and, you know, I would really recommend that. It's not the worst thing in the world, and the dividends that it pays, you know, is just so much better than bumbling in and trying to make something happen ass backwards, pardon the French.
Yeah. Andy, would you like to?
I totally agree, and I wish I had the opportunity to take a year off and learn Chinese when I first got to China. It was the advice that everyone I spoke to gave to me, and I can see the advantages of doing that. But if you haven't got that luxury to take 12 months off to begin to learn a really complex language, I think you can do it just by sheer interest in, you know, a specific area. And, you know, being social, going out, making friends. You don't have to know the language to make friends. I think that's one misconception. And as we've discussed already, friends are more important than contracts. So that's been my experience anyway. I'm gradually learning Chinese, but it's been a much longer process, and I did it ask about. So, but also there's a really excellent in terms of brand collaborations and artist collaborations. There's a really excellent organization called Neocha, who are based out of Shanghai, but they work all over China, and their sole business model is connecting these grassroots creatives in design and music and art, not highbrow art, but just lowbrow design and really beautiful stuff, connecting them up with brands and creating Chinese campaigns, but also campaigns led out of China for a global audience.
Thank you. Yang Lei?
Yeah, I would say, I will add an additional point is you can do during the research stage, you can do some simple matching exercise, like identify what kind of network does your product belong to. I mean, maybe local in Australia or internationally, and then you're trying to find the counter echoing network in China. For example, there are so many groups being set up in the Chinese Twitter, in Weibo. You can do a very simple, if you have some Chinese friend, they can help you to search in the text and to find out who are those kind of being very active groups on the social media in China. And also another source is to rely on your friends' network. I mean, friends' recommendation is very valuable. I mean, for me as well, going to Australia, I know nobody, but knowing a couple of friends and recommendations and who you should turn to. And generally, gradually will connect you to a bigger network. And of course, Andy just mentioned that this kind of platform, more and more, there are a couple of more platforms in China that are created, serving as kind of exchange platform for introducing, like newcha.com is introducing like Chinese young creativities into internationally.
Cool. Kerry, last up.
I think that most people who've spent some time working in China are more than happy to share their experiences with you. So just ask, really. And if you don't have time to learn the language, the importance of a really good translator is essential.
Great, thank you. Everyone, just join me in thanking our panel. Just while I've got your attention too, just on our behalf, I'd like to thank the Festival of Ideas behind the Festival of Ideas, Jess Scully. Thanks for getting us in, Jess.